Hello, and welcome to a new series exploring some of the features in my new plugin, Outgrowth. I built this with my friend BlankFor.ms, and we have a full video manual for it that I'll link in the description, but this is going to be a series that just kind of does a deep dive on some of my personal favorite effects and controls that Outgrowth offers. I'm going to take a look at kind of what was the genesis of that control, and what are some cool ways to use it. So, we're going to start today with the Subvert control. The Subvert is one of my favorite parts of Outgrowth, to be honest, and I think it's one of the things that is the most unique about it. So, what is the Subvert control? Subvert is almost like a compressor, but because Outgrowth isn't a real-time audio effect, it's sort of like a perfect compressor that has an infinite look ahead, because we're loading a sample and we're analyzing it. We're not reacting in real time to what that audio is doing. We know ahead of time what that sample is going to do, what the volume is going to be at certain points. So this is probably easiest to demonstrate just by dragging a sample in here. So I'm going to drag in a sample, of course, a BlankFor.ms sample, and let's just hear how it sounds. It's a nice sample, and we can clearly see on the visual it's got some volume contour to it. It kind of swells at the beginning and then tapers off for a bit, and then we have near silence towards the end, almost the entire second half of it. So, with a normal sample player, this is kind of what we're limited to. We're playing a sample, and it's got its own volume contour baked in. But what Outgrowth allows us to do is manipulate that volume contour. Let's start turning up Subvert and seeing what happens. So at around 25%, we see the loudest parts of the sample are brought down, but also the quietest parts are brought up. We're kind of balancing the volume across the entire sample. In this case, when we turn Subvert up to 50%, we're flattening out the volume of the sample. And at 50%, it's just completely flat. There are no dynamics left in the sample. Let's hear how that sounds. We can hear way more noise in the sample now. You can hear there's a ton of tape noise towards the end of the sample that was almost invisible before. Let's just hear the original one more time. And then as we turn up Subvert, it's so much more present, which is a really cool sound design tool. We're kind of bringing out the subtlest parts of a sample. But the other thing this is really useful for is we can use Subvert to have confidence in the contour that we define by the ADSR. So the ADSR is supposed to control how a note's volume is going to change over time. But with a normal sample player, you're kind of beholden to what the sample itself is doing. So, for example, with this sample, there's a little bit of an onset. There's a soft attack to it. Do you hear how it kind of fades in just a little bit? So, if I were to try to make a plucky sound out of this sample, that is plucky, but it's not as sharp as you might want it to be. Now listen what happens when we turn up Subvert. Now we've got way more attack, way more of a pluck at the start of the sample. And you might ask what happens when we turn Subvert past 50%. Well, let's see. We're actually going to start inverting the volume curve. hence the name Subvert. We're going to subvert our expectations. And now we've got an inverted volume curve. And this is interesting because remember, we had a bit of a slow attack before. If we invert it, we're going to have an even sharper attack. And furthermore, now that noise is going to be the loudest part of the sample. So this is a really interesting way to kind of not only flatten out the sample and kind of get your hands on it and get it, kind of manipulate it in a utilitarian way, but now we can actually completely change how this sample sounds in a sound design perspective. So Subvert's one of my favorites because I think it's really useful if you just want to kind of flatten out this sample and just, work this ADSR, or it's really interesting to just push it further and see what happens, see what is hiding within this sample. So I'm going to look at another cool usage that I really like Subvert for, which is that we can actually kind of explore the tonal and the noisier parts of a sample in a performance-oriented way. So I'm going to flip over to the retain engine. If you don't already know, the retain engine, basically, we're going to start playing back from this start point. And then once we play through up to this window, we're going to start sustaining using granular synthesis. So it's a sustaining algorithm, basically. We are going to sustain this sample indefinitely. Let's just kind of hear how that might sound. Normally, if you're looking at this sample, you might say, I think I want to hear the start, and then I probably want to sustain this chunk in the middle. It looks like there's a lot of content there. Well, let's hear. Okay, so that's a nice way to kind of sustain the content in that sample. But what if we kind of want to change that timbre over time? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn up the Subvert, and then as we're holding out these notes, I'm going to start to move where that window is. We're just going to see what happens. So using the retain engine, we can kind of wander these different parts of the sample. You can also imagine this start point is something that can be modulated. So you could assign that to your mod wheel. You could assign that to aftertouch or pressure so that you're kind of performatively controlling, how much tonality is in each note or how much noise is present in each note. This is something that I think is really powerful and I think is really interesting. I mean, this is kind of just such a unique way to reinterpret a sample and kind of just explore every nook and cranny of it. Yeah. So I think the Subvert is really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of this product, to be honest. It's also really nice just to introduce variations. I think you'll find a lot of the factory presets kind of have this already done. But it's really nice just to add a little bit of jitter to this. You can see now we're kind of wiggling around, and it's really nice just for adding like a little bit of variations and the amplitude of, you know, what you're playing. Let's kind of hear how that sounds. I'm going to start it over here. Oops. So it's just a super nice way to kind of reinterpret this sample in a generative way. You know, you could kind of modulate the volume over time, but I think there's something really cool and really natural to just kind of modulating the subvert and seeing what happens, especially with an algorithm like Retain, where we're also kind of, you know, semi-randomly wandering this sample anyway. Now we're kind of throwing another wrench into the entire process and just creating something that's probably never been heard before, which I think is pretty cool. So I think that the subvert control is really cool. Hopefully after watching this, you do too. I would encourage you to play around with it. It's usually the first thing that I look to once I load a sample. And like I said, whether it's kind of a utilitarian desire of just trying to tame those dynamics a little bit, or just kind of doing something unexpected and turning it up and seeing where it goes. So I think it's well suited for either. And I hope that you have fun with it. And I hope that you enjoy Outgrowth. Thanks.